Gotcha. I love the position that you're in personally, because you are you're a professional, you earn money, but also, um, you it sounds like you have a small business. Sounds like you have some core competencies. You manage residents, so like you're no stranger to the business. Versus,
Yeah.
I just did a call where someone's like, "Hey, I've never done any of this. Then I want to buy a 20 unit." And I'm like, let's establish some of the
Yeah.
basics. So, all right. So, look, you might have heard me talk about this before, but I think you're 100% spot on. I think markets like California, New York, Miami. Well, Miami's not that expensive anymore, but New York and California are just getting increasingly expensive. And the one thing that the coronavirus has exposed is that geography is less important to, sustaining a quality of life than we thought. And
Hmm.
so I've been watching very closely, a net migration into smaller tier cities outside of the core hubs. And
Okay.
people are moving because, hey, I can keep my job by working remotely. And, fine, I might be living an hour out, an hour and a half out, but I'm slashing my costs tremendously. So I think that trend will continue to happen. So here's the exact steps that I would take if I were you
Got
with your
it.
friends. Okay. One, um, the structure of the entity. Okay.
Okay.
Um, Here's the thing about real estate is very entity heavy. So in 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 my angel investment syndicate, 5 guys, we all created an LLC together, right? And
Hmm.
that was the LLC that we all became members of. Okay. And anytime we invested in a business, so there were 5 of us, is the LLC that we create. And anytime we invested in a business, it wasn't us as individuals on their ownership documents, which is what we call the cap table. It was the entity that we created, Harlem Capital
Wow.
Partners LLC. So we would invest via Harlem Capital Partners LLC. And then, you may know how it works. Whatever, if that business generated a profit or a loss, whatever it was, let's say we invested in 5 businesses, those businesses' respective profits and losses would flow over to the entity. And then that entity would flow over the profits and losses to each individual partners based on, equity. So like how
Okay.
much each person put up, right?
Got it.
However, real estate is a very animal where, um, it almost always makes more sense to buy, um, the property with what we call a single asset LLC. So what
Okay.
I would do if I were you is because if you guys form, you guys could go about it the same way that I did the Angel Investment Syndicate, which is the 3 of you guys form a property. Let's say, Luna Holdings LLC,
Got it.
just for example's sake.
Yeah.
And then anything that you guys invest in out of that LLC will belong to the 3 of you guys.
Got it.
Right. And then you can split every deal kind of evenly, or every individual deal will have its own set of allocations depending on how much someone put up per
Ah, that
deal.
makes sense. Yeah.
Right. So in other words, you might own 15% of property one, but maybe property two, you really liked it. You stepped up and bought 25% and
Okay.
all that, and so the ownership in each individual property is going to vary based on how much you put in, right?
Got it.
So you could approach it that way. The way that I do it with my partner, because my partner on the real estate side has told me, he's been burned before in the past and whatever. And so he says, "Hey, I'm going to every deal as an individual. Like I don't really want to be held. I don't really want to be tied. No, he told me, no offense, but I don't want to be tied with anyone on an LLC, because then in the event that we need to liquidate assets, then it becomes a thing. Because if they're all under the same LLC, right, then if you want to sell one property, but the partner doesn't want to sell it and blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah, and then it becomes jammed up. And so the way that we do it on the real estate side is that I am investing, I'm an individual, my partner's an individual. And when we find an asset, we create an LLC that houses that asset, and it only houses that asset.
Mm.
And then we've bought a few deals together. So Nick, every time we buy an asset, we form a new LLC for that
Mm,
asset.
got it.
And there are a number of benefits to doing that, and it's the reason why property owners do it. Number one is, and probably the biggest one is, if there's ever a lawsuit, and as your property manager, someone trips, someone falls, whatever, instead of them suing Luna Holdings LLC, which by the way, after some time will own 50, 100 units, and then they're going for your whole damn set of holdings. Instead of that, they're now just suing Property One LLC, and
Got
you can
it.
contain the damages to just that particular LLC. Okay.
Okay, that's really smart. I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then another really great benefit is, um, you know, individual 1, 2, and 3 decide to buy property 1, you form that LLC. Then the same 3 of you guys buy another property. Then maybe on the next property, a third partner doesn't want to join, and it's just you and another guy. And so it
Okay,
gives you the flexibility to vary your ownership based on each individual LLC. The only
awesome.
thing that I would, kind of, it's not caution against, but it just comes with the territory of going with this approach, is that, after a while, you know, you're going to have a lot of entities that you are managing the accounting for.
Got
And, I just literally this morning just finished paying my accountant for filing all our taxes. And, I have a number of LLCs that report into me. So I have, asset one, asset two, asset three. I have my not for profit. I have the venture fund. But if you ask me, that's a good problem to have.
yeah,
That means that you have assets and stuff like that. So that is the way that I would approach the structure with which you do business with your partners, especially since they're kind of just acquaintances and they're not really like best friends, let's say.
got it. Okay, that's really smart because that not that I mean we all know each other very well, and also they're customers of mine, and we're in the same fraternity, so we're all kind of like in a really
Gotcha.
good position financially. So we're not doing this to be like, oh, let's go. No, it's more like this is long-term investing. We're
Mhm.
doing it, because we do have extra money to invest in, and it's just lower our tax bracket so we can get taxed less and use that money for investments for the future. So we're all pretty
Mhm.
good, position. I would say probably of the 3, I'm probably the one that earns the least out of the other 2, so I'm like, if there would be a person that would try to get it to make money right away, it would be myself, but even then, I'm
Right. Perfect.
perfectly fine with that. And that's really that's an awesome piece of advice, the LLC per
Yeah.
property, 'cause it does. I read Rich Dad Poor Dad when I was really young, and I know, when people come after you, they just think of like you as an individual. But if you spread everything out, and it's like you don't even know what you're going after, you're just like,
You're fucking untouchable, bro. You're
yeah,
fucking untouchable. And then now let me zoom in a layer deeper, right? It depends on
okay,
how, aggressively you want to pursue your real estate goals. But me, I know that I want to buy a lot over
yeah,
time and for life, hopefully. And so my partner, so we talked about the single asset LLC that we created, right?
yeah,
My partner joins those assets as an individual. He'll join as Axel Ost on every property.
okay,
Me, I have another LLC. I know it's crazy, but so there's me as an individual. I created my own LLC that I use just for real estate investments. It's
got it.
called, VM Properties. So that's me. And then when I invest in a deal, I join the documents of that deal, not as John Henry. I join as VM Properties. And
Ah,
so then it just creates an additional layer of separation. And that LLC, VM Properties, all the assets that I own, property one, two, three, four, five, whatever, all of my interests in those properties, whether it's a gain or a loss, they all flow through to VM Properties. That's my holding company. And
gotcha.
then VM Properties flows over to me. So I have zero risk virtually of being ever sued as like an individual, because the individual level is where you have all, your holdings, your assets, whatever. So that's an additional precaution that I take. It's not necessary. My partner has been investing longer than I have, and he doesn't have that. He has, he just invests as an individual. I just don't like it. I learned a
Yeah,
long time ago when I was running my business, first as a sole proprietorship.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I need to have an LLC that I use. So I have an LLC that I use for all my media income. And then I created an LLC that I use for all my property stuff. And now here's the cool thing is VM Properties, which is that entity that I use for my real estate holdings. That entity is becoming very valuable because, it has equity stakes in a number of different properties and it's all flowing through to VM. So now I can actually build credit, lines of credit and stuff like that on VM because that entity is really valuable, which I own 100% of.
Got it.
So that's another really good approach, and it adds a layer of complexity because you're adding one additional entity, and it's not required. But if ever you feel like the time is right, or if you want to start that way, either way, um, it's a good approach.
Okay. Yeah, that's more likely what I'm gonna end up doing because, as much as you think you're not gonna get sued, that's very naive, of anyone to think that.
Bro,
So
I didn't think I was gonna get sued, and we got fucking sued. Someone tripped and fell, and it's a bogus lawsuit. And because we looked into them, and this person has started a number of fraudulent lawsuits against owners. And like that's the thing where I was, getting into this game, I was like, bro, it's never gonna happen. And it happened on my first deal. I was like, wow, people suing it, like it's a sue heavy game because people just associate real estate owners with like a lot of money. And
yeah.
so, so yeah, guard yourself for that. But yeah, man, yeah, happy to talk through any other like questions you may have around like this endeavor because, there's a lot of intricacies and ins and outs around the business.
Gotcha, yeah, and I knew, like, I mean, as far as, like, my social media, though I'm not I mean, I know I put on the question, like, "What are you struggling with?" Which is getting in front of more people, but as far as, with my full-time job and then, my business, I'm growing at a rate that I want to, and I have everything in place. I have a podcast, I have my LinkedIn, I have TikTok, I have Instagram, I have Facebook. And not only that, though, I keep in touch with my customers, really good. And so I mean, I said I go, oh, getting in front of more people, but in reality, I don't want to get in front of more people because the workload is good enough. Like it's slow and steady that I'm building my book of business as far as customers for health insurance. And
Hmm.
little by little, every year I double it, I double it, I double it,
Wow, good for you.
and it just sustains. And I don't, you know, I just kind of just I do. And I noticed my podcast when I originally started it, I started it with the intentions of having people get to know me deeper, right? I was like, I've always been. This is the best way to explain it. Because when I go to the club, I've never been a guy to hook up right there. Like I'm just not that guy. I'm not that tall. I'm not that buff. I'm not that good
Right.
looking. But over a period of time, like if I work with someone or if I go to the gym all the time, and they all little by little I start to win them over. So I'm like, oh, I could
Mhm.
do that. That's my strength. So I'm gonna do that with the podcast. What ended
Mm,
up happening was I ended up networking with all my guests, and guests started becoming customers. Guests started giving
mm,
me referrals.
mm,
I never saw that coming, like
mm.
whatsoever. And it's interesting how the podcast ended up becoming a great way to network. Like instead of saying like
Exactly.
going in for the ask, right? Like, oh, will you want to give me this? Like, oh, would you like to be a guest on my podcast?
Exactly.
And then after that, all the giveaways. Oh, you know what? I'll give you this. I'll give you that. And okay,
Exactly.
cool. You'll be a sponsor for this. And then now it give away and gives them exposure. It makes me look like a winner kind of because I'm giving away
Ab
stuff from the company. So
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. No, I mean, hey, you got it down. I love using, podcasts as like a Trojan horse into into whatever industry. If you ever want to break into an industry, I would always just create a podcast, get the top people, be like, hey, you want to be interviewed? People love talking about themselves,
Yeah.
and then then you got them going. So I 100% concur. What is your podcast about? Are you talking
Uh,
about health insurance or?
no, actually, what I started it's the Practical Entrepreneur. So I pretty much just interview local entrepreneurs and I let them share their story. Um, Now that I took a course to kind of to be able to squeeze more value out of it is when I look at my guests, I'm like, okay, what are they really good at? What value can they bring to the listener? So now I focus um, on a specific topic. Like, for example, I think episode 36 I had with a marketer. When I was listening to her podcast, she mentioned, she goes, I always believe in investing in yourself and buying courses. And she went into detail. She's like, what it does, it saves you time. So you learn what not to do. So you don't keep repeating the same mistakes. Like you take these courses. Yeah, it's going to cost you $500 or $1,000. But, when I heard that, I was like, oh, and sometimes myself, I'm like, I'd be a cheapo. I'm like, I don't want to spend $1,000 for this. Like, but then
Mhm.
hearing that, I'm like, it makes sense. So her topic was investing in yourself. So we went into detail and we
Mm.
talked a lot about, let's say, for example, if someone kept going to all the motivational speeches and talks and stuff like that, but didn't take action, what do you think would help them take action? Because I think
Mm.
a lot of people are stuck in that. Like, oh, like I want to go, but they don't go.
Mhm.
So we went into detail
Mhm.
with that. Another guy who I interviewed, he opened up a taekwondo studio. So technically, that's his passion, right? But he went into detail how it took him 23 years to be able to open up a studio to eventually blow up. So it wasn't like
Oh,
his
wow.
studio did blow up, but it was over a 23-year period of time. So
Mm.
it kind of gives people a perspective as far as, all right, this is what it needs to be done in order for me to take the
Mm.
next step within myself,
I
my business,
I love it,
whatever.
man. I love it. I love it. I think I mean, that's the playbook, man. Like, I wouldn't tweak a thing about it. You have a pillar series that you're developing, you're using it as a Trojan horse, and you're nurturing people over the long run. Like, I don't know how long you've been doing it, but I would go as far as to say that you have a pretty nuanced and pretty advanced understanding of how you use content, right?
Hmm.
Like, people just like use it and just immediately try and go for asks or just like be very like promoty if
Yeah,
in a way,
yeah.
but you're using it just gentle touch point, touch point, touch point. So yeah, man, I think that's the way.
Cool. Well, now that since I'm here and then I have you, would you ever be free to have to be a guest on the podcast?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I would love it. Because I think you went about it 100% the right way. So I would be honored, and especially, like I've had a few folks ask, and I never want to be episode one because then that doesn't tell me that they're committed, right? But you've already mentioned episode 36 and change, so like you're well in the mix.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would be honored to do so. And I can follow up uh, on my email. Yeah, that email that I sent you a note on, that's my personal email. That's,
Okay.
my actual email. So my inbox is always open to you, man. And hey, I would also love if you documented the process, even if it's on podcast or video of you buying your property. I
Oh
just think
yeah.
it would be so valuable for you just to do like a check-in every 2 weeks, every 3 weeks, where you say, hey, here's where I'm at with this thing, and you just broke it down in your learnings, because then you're just gonna start, as you've learned, like people only pick up what you put down, right? So you're gonna start putting down this whole notion that you're looking to buy property, and eventually that will get you to, more deal flow. And then the last thing around the property bit is, because you're in such an expensive market, it's gonna take you. It's gonna be a little bit of research and driving around and pounding pavement on your side to find a great little cash flow market. So you it's probably gonna be like within 2 hours of every major city is a little cash flow market. So,
Mm,
go out there, look for um, look for a cash flow market. Don't, and like the thing that I look for is population growth. So look for a town that is growing, because when it's
mm,
growing, that means people are heading there. And when people head to a place, that means that their quality of life is good. That means there's something. I really trust human nature, right? So
got
if
it.
people are heading to a place, it's not because the place is worse. It's because the place has jobs. It's because the place has cheaper rent.
Okay.
A mixture of things that is really the perfect storm for new investors to be in. So spend a lot of time and energy looking for a good market. And, it could be as simple as, you have family there, or, you might have cousins that live in a place that you always hear about, but you've never been to. So
Got
when
it.
it comes to hunting markets, you're going to have to get in your car, drive around, and walk different markets until you find one that's like got the right mix of growth, of things happening, and growth potential. And that should be the place where you start. And I would love if you documented it all on podcast.
Oh yeah, I'm definitely gonna do that because I know with my health insurance, I was in the I worked for a big health insurance company for 8 years,
Hmm.
and so I really didn't document and I couldn't document. I've been recording videos as a broker now when I got laid off and I got into being a broker. And
Mm,
people have reached out to me and they say like, "Oh, you can totally tell the growth from your very first pieces of content to now. Like it's
mm,
so much better. It's so much more polished." And what's it
mm.
called? I was able to at least do that part of the documenting, but I agree with you with my first when we get together, all that whole process, and then we know all the nuances that I'm going to experience as a rookie,
Hmm.
in real estate investing, will be very valuable for other people so they can see, kind of like what's going on. And also another thing about, a little selfish thing about documenting, it's kind of cool to go back and you're like, wow, like that's how I used to think. That's how I went about
Yep.
things. It's really cool to kind of look back and be like, well, okay, look how much I've grown. So
I love that part, man. It's one of
yeah.
my favorite parts. And the cool thing is, um, the old footage gets more valuable the further away you are from it in time, right? So like,
Mm,
so like the earlier you start, which you've already started, like,
yeah.
it's so cool. I get to watch footage from 6 or 7 years ago where I was like, oh man, that's nuts. And I wish I would have started even before then when I was building my laundry business. I got almost no footage of that. So yeah, man, I loved it. This is a great session, man. I'm glad it could be helpful, around the specifics of real estate and also some of the podcasting stuff. And yes, I would be honored to be a guest. So,
Cool.
yeah, follow up with me on that email and drop me a note. And, I'm going to finish. I have a lot of these sessions like for the next, like, I would say 2, 3 weeks.
Okay.
But then when they wrap up, I'll be, available to jump on the pod and,
Okay.
we can do it up and kind of take it from there, man. But I would love if you kept me posted also on your real estate journey. It's just
Cool.
personally of,
Yeah.
of interest
I'll
to
let
me.
you know because I know I talked to one of the guys yesterday who mentioned it, and it was we we talked about it briefly, and then my brain just started turning, and he's just like, "Oh, I got you going, huh?" I'm like, "Yeah," I'm just like, so I haven't really uh, fully talked with all three of them,
Mm,
but
mm,
and now that I have this confidence of how to kind of go about it, and with one of them being a real estate agent and in the
exactly.
game, it's going to help us all out. So, but it's just that mindset is really what I've learned is that you have to have the proper mindset when going into anything because if you don't have the proper mindset, you have all these false expectations of of what it's supposed to be like, but it's not. So I got this, um, the piece of information, the LLC being an investing as an LLC in an LLC to protect yourself and then individually.
Exactly.
That's
Yeah, man.
that's gold. That was awesome. But
I,
thanks
I
again, Henry, for doing this. I've been following you for a very long time. It's
That's
really
great,
cool.
man.
Someone, a person of color, and I'm assuming you're Dominican.
I'm Dominican. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and it's 'cause you don't really see it that much in, on TV or anything. So I'm glad that social media exists and that we're able to find people like us and then have
Yeah,
similar
man.
struggles as far as like kind of breaking that barrier because it always feels like, we're kind of up against the wall and you're just like where the system is played against us. But I'm glad that
Mm,
people like you exist.
it's
There's a couple of videos that I saw. There's one about real estate. It's like about how you would invest in one property and then you would get a loan and then
Yep.
and then just play. I'm like I was just like
Mind blown. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. That same thing happened to me too when I like learned about that, man. It was a mind blowing moment, man. But hey, I also enjoyed this greatly, man. So, um yeah, I like where you're at, man. I think you're in a great position. I like your temperament, your attitude, your approach, and you're in it for the long haul. So, yeah, sounds good, brother. I look forward to you following up and jumping on your pod. And please keep me posted on the journey. Best of
Cool.
luck to you. Also, let me know how it goes when you talk to your partners. I think with that info, you should be able to kind of, get them all the way there. And then the
Cool.
next step is hunting down markets.
Sounds good. Cool. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
My guy, Nick, be well, man.
You too. Likewise. Bye bye.
Cheers.